Welcome to today's webinar. It's episode number 2 after the Crossroads, this series about AI and our future. We'll feature today the topic, the business of intelligence, with a focus primarily on small business and how AI is being applied. So we're seeing AI headlines almost daily promising super intelligence. But in business today, small business in particular, it's much more practical. Streamlining operations rather than inventing new markets. Our feature today, the business of intelligence, asks a number of questions exploring whether cutting costs alone can fuel lasting growth or if innovation is essential. The newsletter on Sunday and this webinar associated with that newsletter explores how automation through AI is transforming business and associated business processes. And the professions like accounting and wealth management, where relational skills and trust are becoming as valuable as technical expertise. The challenge now, turning today's productivity gains into tomorrow's engines of value. So our panelists, welcome Rachel, welcome Brent, welcome Emerson, and Jwalant may be joining us shortly. But let's get started. I've got a few questions I'd like to ask, and I'm going to start out with you, Rachel. And I've enjoyed your input during our youth series as well, so welcome back. The first question I'm going to pose to the panel is, which business processes in small enterprises, such as customer services or accounting or marketing, are seeing the most practical gains from AI adoption and why? I know you're into coding, I know you're entrepreneurial and you work with small businesses, so you probably have some insights into how AI is being employed today in the small enterprises. So let's hear your views, Rachel.
I think one of the things is that time saving is a huge thing that comes into account, especially when it comes into small businesses. Um, when you don't have the resources and you have to know exactly what you are looking for and exactly what your customer needs and exactly, it takes a very specific amount of expertise. And so I think the biggest benefit and gain that small enterprises, at least in my personal experience and what I see from things like Twitter, where you have built-in public forums where people are taking up the advantage of AI to take what they know and get code off the ground quickly and iterate quickly, that time element becomes very important to getting things in front of users faster. And that is one of the big upsides, I would say, of AI. Time savings, I guess you could call that cost savings or resource savings in particular ways. And I
Uh,
would say more so than automation. That speed to testing is a huge unlock, particularly in the software, in the product development fields, and in all of the consumer facing fields that we see. I know that there's a huge focus on finance and accounting where automation is huge, so I wanted to represent that side as well.
well, that's often referred to as increasing efficiency. So that's sort of the headline. But Brett, what do you see in terms of the adoption of AI? How is it being applied in the small business arena?
Well, I mean, what I've seen was, I've been contacted in regards to AI for starting in finance and mostly around business process streamlining. And they're wondering what that can do. And where it actually leads is towards forecasting and, what AI can do there. And really, what really catches their attention is, for the companies I was dealing with anyway, is labor forecasting, right? So they can do their labor forecasts and they'll know at the end of the month whether they ran over labor or not, and what they'd like to do is see this in real time. So quicker information, more timely information that they can act on as opposed to react to. So I think that's where we're seeing an uptake with AI and where it's intriguing for small business.
So the items that you've mentioned sound to me like using AI primarily as a cost savings, reducing time, which is money. Uh,
Yeah.
Emerson, your view, what do you see? How do you see AI being adopted in the industries you're familiar with?
So my perspective is financial services in the investing business, and I'd say three things. The first is research. So let's say that you're investing or looking at investing into aerospace companies, and they might be Series A to C category companies. Uh, there's probably only 2,000 to 3,000 companies across the U.S., Canada, Europe, etc., UK that fit those criteria. And as an investor, you can use some of these technologies to figure out what's the full universe of potential investable companies. And in the past, that would have been a very difficult thing to do. But in a matter of hours now or a day, you can develop a pretty detailed sense of what the full universe looks like in any particular domain. That gives, for somebody who wants to understand the full world that they're engaging in, a sense of what that looks like from a 30,000 foot level. So that's the first piece. Is it can really help on research to develop an overall sense and confidence in a domain. The second piece, and I think this will be captured a bit later, is productivity. You can quickly speed up work, ask a number of questions, do that with AI that make any individual worker much more effective. There's an ambition question here. Ambitious people can become even more effective by using these technologies. And the third piece I would say, and this ties back into the first one on research, is business development. Is just as investors have a limited number of companies that they can invest in, they have a limited number of potential clients, customers, or capital partners. So you can say, here are the criteria for potential partners that we are interested in. You can outline, let's say, 5 different criteria, and you can figure out pretty quickly what the number and also exact companies are that you should consider pursuing. So it gives you a sense of potential partners to engage on, key characteristics, and then that serves as a basis for strategy, which we can get to later.
Okay, so we can see that both the administrative processes as well as those that would contribute increasing productivity and revenue, we're touching both sides of the coin. But we've seen when e-commerce kicked in 10, 20 years ago, small businesses were very slow in the uptake. I remember working with the Chamber of Commerce here in Alberta and nationally, with some concerns that with all the promise of what e-commerce was offering, small businesses were slow on the uptake, and that appears to be somewhat the case, maybe less so, as it relates to AI. So my next question, and I'll start out with you on this, Brett, what are the most common barriers small businesses face when implementing AI? Cost, expertise, data access. I mentioned data access in particular because the data needs to be digitized. You've got to have access to data. If you don't have the data, how do you get started? And how can they overcome them? So what are the barriers, and what can be done to overcome those barriers? Brett?
I think what I've seen in not just small businesses but municipalities is they don't have the data in a format that they can consume. They've got historical documents that would be quite useful in providing insights to them and also helping them forecast, but they just don't have it. They either have it in, still some of them have it in paper formats, or they have it in databases where they can't find the documents. So it's we've got an issue in Alberta where there's always been a boom bust cycle, and when there's a boom, they're too busy to invest in IT because they're busy and they're full out, and when there's a bust, they have no money to invest in IT, right? So it's the infrastructure. It's an infrastructure issue, definitely.
Okay, Emerson, I'll go to you second, then I'll end up with Rachel. What do you say, Emerson? What are the barriers that you see to small business uptake?
The one that most comes to mind is cultural. It's that to use AI effectively, you need to start, or at least one important part in starting is saying, I want to use this to have an edge. So you have to first have a mindset that I want to outcompete my opponents, my competitors, and I will therefore use this in the savviest way possible. And that requires a lot of time, actually, to tinker with different types of technologies, whether it's ChatGPT, whether it's Kimi, different Chinese types of resources that might be more efficient. It takes a lot of time to say, okay, I want to be better. I need to invest time to understand how these different technologies work. I need to think through different prompts that I can write for them that give me an edge, which often takes, a good amount of time, hours sometimes, to think through complicated prompts to feed to AI to then create better outputs. But that all comes back to saying, okay, I want to not just be efficient, but I actually want to use this to develop in Edge and experiment on a consistent basis as part of the other things that I'm doing. So to me, it would be cultural, and I would think that it's startup small businesses that would most want to do that because they have limited resources and therefore need to do this to outcompete their opponents. But not many people across different sectors are going to be thinking from that vantage point.
Okay, gotcha. Rachel, you're involved with small business. In fact, you've been helping as a startup and with your own. So what's your view? What are the impediments to small business getting started, and what might be done to overcome those impediments or barriers?
Yeah, well, I think one positive thing is that the regulatory side of things is not significantly challenging at the moment. It's a little bit of the Wild West, and so people are still in the mode where if you want to try to do something, for the most part, you can try to do it. That would be something that is positive. On the other side of things, I would somewhat agree with Emerson in the sense of cultural, but as a small business person who focuses very much on bringing AI direct to consumers, I think it's trust almost from the other end that is one thing that prevents companies from adopting. And particularly, one of the things that I've seen in market research is that when you start to, we saw this extensively research after research. When you explicitly tell consumers that AI is being used or artificial intelligence or any sort of model, they no longer associate or trust that produces improvement in speed or efficiency or quality, rather very much the opposite. Because to Emerson's point, it takes a significant amount of skill to use AI in prompting in a way that will produce something that's better and not just something that's marginally worse or larger but general. And so in a way, you're asking people to not just be experts in their own field, which was enough in the past for you to be a great in finance or great in accounting, but you're asking them to adopt and become excellent at something additional, which requires a lot of extra work. This is why I do think that software is one of the areas that stands to benefit most, because if you have the expertise both with software and AI to produce something that is useful in the accounting field, that maybe helps people to dial in more in what they need to do in accounting, what they need to do in investing, or in any other field, then you've produced something that doesn't have quite a heavy lift for the individual expert in that field, and that still enables them to gain the advantage of AI. So I think I do see a lot of potential in software development with AI right now, if that makes sense.
Let me carry on a little bit with that comment, Rachel. It would seem to me that if I were a small business owner, I would think that the greatest risk is risking my relationship with the consumer, which is where my revenue is generated. And the least risk would be in administrative processes, although it's a cost savings or cost. I'm not exposed to the losses of a customer. Is that potentially a reason why administrative processes get attended to more often or first than taking a risk with the consumer relationship?
Well, I mean, I think we've seen in the past a lot of cases that were risky where people went all in on AI for consumer facing products and it didn't turn out particularly well for them. So, sort of to bolster your point.
Yeah.
And I also think that Fred's laughing, I'm sure, could think of Chegg, who comes to mind as one in the education space. But yeah, I do think that in administrative processes, there's more of an opportunity to figure things out. There are more degrees between the end user and the internal operations of the business, so that if there are mistakes, they can be caught earlier. That said, consumers want AI. They want a smarter way of doing things. They understand that this is an exciting prospect for them to be able to improve their lives. They just need to be able to trust it. And in the way that it's been implemented, because they use things like ChatGPT and LLMs for themselves, they have the opportunity to see firsthand, I would say, especially among younger demographics, where those gaps are specifically. So then it lends a little less trust for something like finance. Well, if you're using AI for finance, is that the same thing as when I use, ChatGPT on my assignments or when I'm looking something up and it gives me information that I don't know? Well, I don't like that, so I'm a little hesitant right now.
You want to add anything there, Brett?
Well, if the AI financial agents are based on, TELUS's AI phone agents, then yeah, I could see why you'd be in trouble. Like most of the customer service agents out there, they've improved significantly, but they're still issues with a lot of that. And I that was kind of why I was smiling, because instead of answering phones now, they just put you in an endless loop of talking to AI agents.
Well, I mean, to be between you and I'd be perfectly happy to speak to an agent rather than waiting 16 hours, which I have had that experience with TELUS. So, though, Emerson, the next question. For small business owners with limited resources, which they do, that's almost defines what the small businesses are. What AI tools or platforms offer the best return on investment today? I mean, you can get specific into a particular app, and I don't mind the advertising, but maybe the business process that they would be focused on.
Well, I'm experimenting with it quite a bit. I pay for ChatGPT, so I have their pro version, and I find that really helpful.
Mhm.
And I actually find their recent update, the ChatGPT 5, to be pretty helpful. You can do larger scale research than you did before. So and I'm actually running these things right now, just batch by batch on different companies, as we're talking, is saying, you know, what are the 1,000 capital partners outside of our current universe in a particular country, or let's say Europe, to engage with, and you actually get some pretty good results back across a number of categories, and it's not too onerous. So I find ChatGPT for the paid version to be effective. And then there's another one that I was recommended that I found is helpful, called Kimi, which is on the Chinese side, kimi.com, and it's good for intensive research into particular companies. So I find that to be more detailed than what you get with ChatGPT. ChatGPT can be good for for understanding the universe, but if you then want to go into a very detailed long prompt on a particular company, it's Kimi that I find gives the best research reports. And all of this, of course, has to be taken with a grain of salt. But again, it gives you a sense of the universe from which, and we'll talk about this later, you then have to exercise human judgment. But it gives you a pretty good lay of the land.
Yeah. Rachel, what's your perspective?
My perspective is that Emerson's on the dark side with ChatGPT 5. Wow, Emerson, diving in off the deep end there. Altman forever, hey. No, I think one of the most interesting things is that the further that we get along the AI pipeline is that the more specialized tools you tend to see. So to Emerson's point, where a lot of the time it can be difficult to come up with and craft your own prompt, particularly if maybe you're just coming to these things for the first time in 3 years or 2 years. If you want videos, you can go to something like Veed.io. If you want research, you can go to Perplexity. If you want AI prototyping, you use Cursor or Bolt. So whatever uh, your specific need is, you can find tools that are a little bit more specific for that so that you don't have to come up with that prompting by yourself. So I would say a lot of them are just a ChatGPT or a Grok or a Claude search away. One thing that I do want to highlight is that if for example, you are limited to free models for using LLMs, that it's worthwhile to test out different models depending on what you need, because each of the free models does offer different things better. I've worked extensively with GPT and Grok and Claude and a little bit of DeepSeek. And for example, to Emerson's, I got down on Emerson a little bit, but ChatGPT really does excel at things that are humanities based over something like perhaps Claude. And Claude excels at coding implementation, whereas Gemini excels at coding planning, and Grok is very good at social elements and optimizing for a younger audience. So even among the free tools that are available, there is a lot that you can accomplish for general needs and even some more specific needs. And then it's worthwhile to look for a specific coding tool or a specific tool if you have a deeper need, because there are a proliferation out there.
Well, and they're coming every day. I mean, that's part of the tsunami. It's not just the rate of adoption, it's the rate of development, and how agents are now emerging that are quite specialized. Brett, you're familiar with the concept of agents, but tell us a little bit more. What do you see as the tools of preference for small businesses?
I mean, I think it's got to be more along the lines of efficiency. So still a lot of small businesses run fairly lean. So I was reading an article the other day, and they said they gained over 100,000 hours in efficiencies by implementing agents inside of JP Morgan. So, they've gotten, they had individuals becoming way more efficient. And I think that's probably key where small businesses can kind of excel at that, right? And as Emerson said, also in decision making, research, and those areas, making them more effective. I think where you're going to see your agents is mostly around monitoring, providing insights, doing menial, repeatable tasks. I think you're going to see RPA, like what we used to be called RPA. You're going to see that go to agents and actually have those agents make decisions as opposed to just doing the process.
Yeah, that's interesting. The making of decisions versus just sharing of data. The adding the decision process is quite a contribution. That's a leap ahead into super intelligence. I see in the chat there's some discussion about, do customers even matter? That is, do customers still care about personal service as they're out shopping, looking for price, looking for availability, looking for speed of transport? As routine tasks become increasingly automated, how can small businesses retain their personal touch and maintain strong customer relationships as if they even matter? I'll jump in. Emerson, let's go first with you on that one.
I mean, my basic thought on this is that, and we talked about this in the youth series, is that the more that is that a risk with AI is that it tells you what it believes you want to hear, and that's a risk on the ChatGPT side. Is the sycophancy idea that you are actually being fed what the AI, based on what you've written to it, believes you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And people then can be sucked into these worlds where they're getting advice or they're getting feedback or certain facts that align with their pre-existing views. So that means then that personalized, well, that white glove, high sophistication service matters more and more, where you're actually talking with somebody who can ask hard questions, who cares about you, who understands your actual background, can actually provide truth, what they believe is actually best for you. That becomes even more important. And I think we're probably moving more towards that kind of world where people have so much knowledge, they're so engaged with these AIs, and feel isolated as a result, that people that actually tell you the truth in a sophisticated diplomatic way will be of even more value. So that's my sense on the world that we're quickly going back to because of how sophisticated some of these technologies are becoming, and because of some of their risks that people are becoming increasingly aware of.
So it's just not just empathy, it's integrity as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's character, ethics, judgment, discretion. This is becoming more and more important because without that, people, I think, have just a gnawing sense that what they're receiving is not actually true.
Exactly. Rachel, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think it's an excellent point. I also think, though, maybe again bringing in the younger perspective, that getting to that point in your career, getting to a sufficient level of expertise where you can tell all of those things and where you can combine it with character ethics and great morals and values and great communication, that's a very advanced career stage for most people. And most people starting out, especially in an advanced profession, wouldn't start out with that. And so I worry that if that's the thing that we are moving towards meeting with the use of AI tools as they are right now, that's disproportionately negatively affecting people who are starting out in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that in addition to that, because I don't disagree with what you said, of course, that's a necessary part of it. I do think that it also needs to be, I want to develop and add one more thing in here before I come to a conclusion. And this is that I feel that a lot of the time there is a perception that with additional AI comes increased speed. With increased speed comes decreased cost. And with AI implemented the way that it is, that's not necessarily true because of token cost and because the amount of expertise that it takes to use the AI itself bumps up task time. And so if we're not getting, at least at the moment, an astronomically large amount of decrease of time just from using AI, and if it takes young people, if it takes a significant amount of time in career to hit the point where you need to be, where you can deliver this very white glove service, as you're saying, I think there needs to be an additional development of AI where it is easier for people at any stage of the career, whether it's starting out or whether it's very advanced, to use it with excellence at speed. And so it has to be easy for people to quickly use AI to come to faster, better conclusions. That sounds self-evident, but for every individual field, that's going to take a different amount of research. It's going to take more dialed in software. It's going to take experts in those fields who are expert both at the subject and at the AI to create customized solutions for that field so that the information is better, higher quality, and faster. That decreases the risk for people starting out in the field because they can still go through being quick at those sort of menial or lower level or expertise positions. It increases the benefits for people at higher levels in those fields because obviously it's going to be even faster and easier for them to focus on that white glove service, as you mentioned. And so I think that's a more holistic perspective of how this can push the field forward without disproportionately affecting either end.
Yeah, I mean, not only holistic, you sort of brought into focus the importance of keeping the consumer in mind in product development. The entire supply chain in most industries starts at the top. What AI seems to now enable is to be able to start at the bottom where the consumer is and understand why they buy, when they buy, and how they buy. That, at least in public services, is a revolution. And in many industries which are highly regulated, that make their living with the regulator rather than sort of serving the consumer, including telecommunications, that is big news. And as a consumer, I'm delighted to hear that. Brent, you want to add anything here?
I mean, right now, yeah, you need definitely skills in regards to learning the prompts and how to navigate AI. I was reading an article the other day and it says as AI gets better, people's job skill sets will atrophy. So they'll actually become worse at their jobs because they are depending on AI, which is kind of ironic, right? Because the big fear is AI is going to take your job. Well, this article was basically saying that the capabilities of the employee go down as they implement AI more. So
Well, that's interesting because the skills that they're using today may not be the skills that they need for tomorrow. So maybe they're being, maybe it's a wake-up call.
yeah,
And if there's anything that we continue to underscore, it's the relevance of continuous learning, and that definitely came out of the youth series. That there's no greater skill than, quote, not education, but learning, and having that as a lifelong undertaking. So it's adaptive throughout. Okay, last question. What role do advisors, including accountants and consultants, play in helping small businesses integrate AI into their core operations? This plays into one of the earlier questions about the difficulty of take-up. If they're overwhelmed, maybe calling in a third party makes it a little bit easier in partnering to make their operation more efficient, more profitable. So what role can advisors, accountants, and consultants play in helping small business integrate AI into their corporations? And how is that role itself evolving? I mean, I look at the KPMGs of this world, the Price Waterhouse, the McKinsey. They must be shaking in their boots with the emergence of AI enabling small business advisors to really zero in with their silver hammers on how to help small and even larger organizations without needing that big name anymore. Emerson, you want to jump in here? You're working with a fairly large firm, if I'm not mistaken. How do we help?
It's a good question, and I don't necessarily have a great starting answer on it. I mean, my first thought is I wouldn't go to a large consultancy for any advice on this kind of stuff because they probably just aren't up to speed with it. The people who I'd be asking on this would be people who are working in the companies that are creating these technologies. And that's what I'm trying to do right now is, call a friend at OpenAI or call a friend at Anthropic and talk with them and get their advice on how they would optimize these technologies and what they see as being some of the limitations. So talk with people who are actually building these products versus people who are just, who probably don't know or have actually used this in their own work to optimize their own work as much as people in small businesses have. So that would be my first thought. My second thought would be a good advisor, or I would even say just a good teammate, would offer prompts on how to use these technologies in a creative way. So in the company that I'm in, we're a fairly small company, and a number of us have humanities backgrounds. One guy worked in the Israeli the IDF, a special ops background, another person philosophy background. Our approach on this is saying, okay, be really creative with the AI. So if we're looking at how to improve our service offering, say, like, use your humanities background and your creativity as best as you can. So say, okay, what are the best service offerings out there? What does the Ritz-Carlton do in terms of hospitality? What would a Ritz-Carlton approach be applied to what we are doing? And think through other top service providers and then say, okay, what would that look like in our context? And you can end up being very creative with AI that then provides you with some extremely interesting out-of-the-box responses. So my thought as an advisor would be encourage people to use their brains and their imagination to come up with creative prompts that get the AI to think in a creative way about your own business. So those would be my thoughts, is talk with people who are actually building the technologies and be super creative in how you ask questions, and that can give you some really useful feedback.
Interesting. The words creative and asking really jump out at me. Rachel, you want to jump in here?
I think I disagree with that a little bit in the sense that I'm starting a business. I have a lawyer. There's no way I'd be using an LLM to there's no way I'd be using an LLM in terms of in terms of that level of specialized knowledge. I'm not great with accounting. There's no way I'm using an LLM to come up with that kind of specialized knowledge, paired with the information that you gave earlier about the fact that LLMs effectively act as echo chambers. They will amplify both your knowledge if you have it and your lack of knowledge if that's what you have. So they're very slow to correct and find a mistake. And without the expertise to be able to identify any mistakes there, it's, I would say, generally unsafe to use a technology that won't hold up in court if you get taken to court over financial issues or legal issues or specialized issues. To me, that is and always will be, the reason that people in the engineers will always need to put an engineering stamp on a document, regardless of, and they'll be responsible for whatever AI that they used. And so I suppose that on the end where you're saying, yes, if you're in the IDF and you need a more creative AI prompt, you are absolutely the person who's going to be best situated in order to maximize and bring out the best of AI for those particular applications. If you are not, then I would say that professions doubling down on and emphasizing to the user, hey, embracing in a sense. If you want to become more familiar, Rachel, you're with incorporating or limited liabilities, absolutely get some generalized information from AI. It'll do a really great job of briefing you, and that'll be time we don't have to spend in our call. But for your specific business in your specific area where we have not only the spirit, the letter of the law, but also the spirit, or in accounting where we have things like best practices that might not be codified, but that might be recognized by a specific government in a certain way. I think for all those reasons, emphasizing that and providing that white glove service you talked about is sort of one of the best methods forward. And then the other thing that I do want to highlight there is the trust component. I talked about it earlier, but in sort of sci-fi fiction, we've had the idea of the uncanny valley for a very long time. Younger people are while they are still in their developmental phase, they're developing the ability to differentiate between very fine levels of AI usage versus an absence of AI usage. And so I think the ability to provide a human for human to human contact will never lose its relevance as long as we are human beings. So that is definitely that trust element, that humanity element, I think will continue to be important across the professional fields going forward, augmented by AI as opposed to replaced by it.
Well, that's comforting. Thank you. Brett, your point.
And just to follow up on what Rachel was saying, there's been talk of getting some of these AIs actually to get provide a doctoral degree to specialized AIs, right? So if they have, they can certify that AI as a doctor or a lawyer, and then specialize it in that field. Then they can actually, have it certified to provide information. I don't know how far that's gone, but I've seen a number of articles on that where they're trying to figure out the ethics of doing that. And if you certify your AI agent as an accountant or a lawyer or doctor, and how does that affect the organization?
How small businesses can find what they need when this is brand new to them. We're giving them principles, but I don't. Where do they look? There is no yellow pages. Can they find the resources that they need by going to the accounting association or going to the Chamber of Commerce? Where do you find consultants today if you're in small business? I know that's not on the list of the 5 questions, but it's one that I'm finding difficult. And Brent, I know you with ABC Tech, trying to break through on the marketing side to get access to small business. Are chambers of commerce ready to help small businesses? Okay, Jwalant, introduce yourself. Any comments you might want to make? I know you haven't heard and been party to the session, but you've been involved with small businesses. You have extensive background in AI and consulting. Let me give you that broad question. How do you see AI playing a role in helping small businesses not just save money, but to make money? Anything you want to add here?
Sure. No, it's a very interesting question. Thank you, Perry, for the question and also giving me this opportunity to share this view. So AI has been one of the very critical technology for all the industry players, including the small and medium business. Although to embrace the AI for their routine use and to grow their business, SMB have a lot to do. The Chambers of Commerce has been in one of the important role to play for this. What I see AI is trying to create like a bringing structure to all the distributed data all across internet on digital version, but to bring a complete larger picture sense, organize it, to bring a logical response, automate their task, just like a digital assistant. So SMBs have a lot of challenge to have the manpower to be paid as they are just owner-run business mostly, or having a shorter staff. So AI can help them to reduce their costs primarily for just working with the shorter staff by assisting many of their routine business workflows in automated way. And those information on internet, or rather organizing, scheduling their calendar, or also to reach out to their customers on a routine basis, who are patrons to their business on a regular basis. All of that comes to a point where AI plays a major role, just like a staff. So I will keep it short here. Yeah.
Okay, that's sort of revisiting the overview. Now, I know there was an outstanding comment. Rachel, I know you and Emerson had brought an additional point. So,
Emerson, do you want to elaborate on what you were saying? I didn't catch all of it. There was a noise.
I had a quick response back to you. Well, 3 things. One is, as you were saying, I fully agree that we need to take what we learned from AI and then expose that in the real world as quickly as possible. And that's something that wasn't covered in the earlier questions. But if it's a legal opinion, you need to then engage with a lawyer, because there's technicalities and certain norms that just won't be covered through these searches. Just same thing on the investment side. You might have an overview of potential targets, but you then need to call 20, 30 people in that sector to understand the actual practicalities of those companies, the management teams, etc. So it gives a overall universe sense, and then you then have to go out and meet face to face and engage with reality. But it can, I think, expedite that learning process beforehand. So to me, that's the first response, agreeing with what you said earlier. The second piece on consultants, my thought is this is such a fast moving field that the people to trust are people who are actively grappling with the rapidly changing technology. And that requires people who really are enthusiastic about it rather than consultants that might be doing this as part of one stream in a large diversified consulting company. That's my second thought. My third point is back to you, Brett, on the PhD piece. I saw that thing come out from ChatGPT last week saying that GPT-5 is meant to be PhD level. And I just thought, based on some PhDs I've met, and even my own, I thought, wow, could a AI technology actually replicate what you've done in 5 or 6 years? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But I think now is probably not a good time to start a PhD.
Yeah, there is mostly around healthcare where I was kind of reading another article and they're saying, getting these agents certified in the healthcare field so that they can actually use that as referrals in regards to previous history, like basically replacing doctors and nurses in regards to consultations.
Well, we will get into that in some detail during the webinar on quote caring, which will bring forth discussions of health, education, psychology, social work, even the faith-based professions, because caring is the human being as a whole, and is not what many of the professions have become, which is highly fragmented in how they deal with pieces of the body and parts of a person's life. So that will be core to the discussion we'll be having. And now that I think about it, even working with the business, is accounting understanding the full business? Is those in marketing understanding the full business? Is there something missing when we deal with the business and we break it down into a process versus the business itself as a whole? I know those in management need to have tools much broader than simply HR and accounting and marketing and product development. They've got to understand staff, they've got to understand organization, they've got to understand managing change, they've got to understand financing. That is a broad array of what one individual needs to carry or to facilitate in order to make a business work. Over and over again, it seems to me we put so much emphasis on product and so little emphasis on process, particularly as it relates to understanding the consumer. Rachel, the business that you and I had some involvement with is now sold. I got involved in it because I was so impressed by the executive and the staff with their absolute passion to know the customer better than anybody else, and to look at the learning process, not education, but what people needed to do and did do in learning. And that applies to businesses as well. If you're in small business, learning is core to your operation. And yet we spend very little time talking about that broad perspective of understanding your consumer. Okay, anybody want to add anything there? Otherwise, I'm going to call on the audience. I know there's been some interesting discussions going on the sidelines in the chat. I'll call on Yogi. Yogi, you've made a very good point there about relevant to this topic.
Small businesses are perpetually feeling like they're on a treadmill and don't have enough resources to do what they'd like to do. And that includes even tiny amounts of R&D to explore product ideas or product extensions or even new product ideas that they're thinking about. And the incredible access to information that AI provides, I think, dramatically reduces those costs of very rudimentary R&D and should be a huge help to small businesses.
I like the concept of rudimentary R&D. Rudimentary R&D is asking questions, right?
Yeah.
And if there's anything that AI in the current form can do well, it's answer questions, which is called prompting. and learning how to do prompts as it relates to your business is being able to ask the right questions about your business and using AI as an aid in that exercise. So you're absolutely bang on. Rudimentary R&D is what every business can do today. Yep.
These businesses aren't going to phone up Accenture or McKinsey
Right.
or the Big Four.
Right.
They'd be scared to death just to pay for the introductory meeting.
Right. Yeah, $500 an hour minimum.
Mm.
And
Really, though,
they'll charge you for thinking time too. Rachel, did you want to add anything there?
do you not sense, though, that there's a need to be able to ask the right question in the first place? There are wrong questions that if you start asking those, they will lead you down a path that will invariably take you to an incorrect conclusion.
If
Absolutely.
there is anything we need to teach students getting ready for employment in their careers, it's how to ask questions and how to carry sufficient doubt to the answers that they get back so that they remain curious, they remain critical thinkers. Anita, you've got a point you want to make or a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I noticed Peter McKinnon, who actually left the conversation to go somewhere in a meeting, and he talked about AI agents and liability. And you know, anytime you bring in new technologies, there's always somebody or some organization out there will say, yeah, but if I don't get all the answers I want, or if I use the information given to me and I incur some loss, then they always want to sue or whatever. And this can really dampen the use of some of these new technologies. So I was wondering, does anybody know what Peter McKinnon was talking about when he mentioned liability? And is that something that's going to be an issue out there?
Well, I mean, there's two forms of liability. One of them is sort of your credentials or your credibility in the market. The other one is actually being in court. Losing credibility in the market is something that we're well aware of because the media seems to be right on top of AI with its skepticism and with its revealing of some of its shortfalls, which is creating doubt or uncertainty, which is probably healthy in the early stages of any product's development, whether it be replacing the horse with the car or putting pipelines in place of rail. You need to have a healthy dose of skepticism as new technologies emerge. Now, that's media, that's the market. To me, I'm more interested in market impact on the credibility of new industries than I am about the legal liability. However, you're right. I mean, Europe and the United States and Canada are all working on trying to understand how to regulate AI, how to regulate synthetic biology, how to regulate emerging technologies. This is overwhelming and moving at a speed of light that is really challenging the whole governance process, which brings us back to Peter and the webinar we'll be having on governance in early September. Anyone, I mean, I've waxed eloquent there, and it was brilliant what I had to say. Anybody want to add anything regarding the point that Anita's making about liability?
I think that, that might be just in regards to why they're looking to get some of these agents certified or, credentialed, right? There's a trend a little while ago where people were using ChatGPT as a psychologist. And I saw an interview with Sam Altman saying, don't do that. I mean, it may give you may think it's giving you good advice, but it's all public, right? So anybody can search that. So it's kind of a...
He actually went on regarding the modifications being made to ChatGPT-5 is instead of giving you therapy, he gives you a process of consult with your doctor, consult with an expertise. It's becoming a little bit more Rogerian than directive. Peter, you've just been referenced and you're back. So do you want to handle that question as it relates to Anita's concern about, where does liability fit into all this?
Yes, well, thank you, Perry, and thank you for the speakers that I just heard. I'm sorry I was late getting here. I was at a meeting much of the day. My main point, Anita, was really not so much about liability, although that's a consequence of what I was talking about in regard to integrity. So integrity to me is a critical issue in dealing with AI, in the sense of the people who build AI systems and the people who run, for this example, mission critical AI systems in whatever application it might be, like running pipelines, hydroelectric facilities, etc. They should be, in a human resources context, questioned in their hiring with respect to their liability, with respect to their integrity. It's not about ethics. Ethics is a cultural thing. Liability is your human core little speaker that talks to you when you maybe tell a little white lie and you know you are. If you're telling a lie that you don't know you are, then you probably have a weak, very weak, if not any integrity. So it's the integrity that I think is much more important. And ethics is, of course, varies across the world. Eastern ethics and Western ethics, if you think about AI, it's quite different. So integrity is at the core, in my view. So with that said, of course, there's a liability issue, and how do we enforce, in a legal sense, the consequences of a liability? And that's, of course, basically a legal concept. And so we need to have rules and regulations, and we also need to have certification, I believe, for the people I just outlined. And in that context, we also need to have penalties and a way of enforcing those penalties. So it's all about a massive change in how we deal with a technology that is actually able to manipulate the human mind.
What's interesting in all of this, and I did some writing in the past week about the know-it-all. We've all met someone who's a know-it-all. The know-it-all is not necessarily popular, and the know-it-all is not even necessarily someone who's a great contributor. But AI has emerged as, quote, a know-it-all. The know-it-all is lacking something, and that's typically empathy and a curiosity about who you are. A know-it-all is very self-oriented. As AI evolves, and I say evolves, it needs to evolve beyond being simply a know-it-all. Otherwise, it's just another form of encyclopedic, providing you with knowledge, but not being particularly adept at its application, depending upon you and your prompting. Because if your prompting is wrong, then its answer is going to be wrong. And all it is bringing you knowledge in response to your prompt. So you've got to be really good at prompting, and I'm not quite sure people are really there yet. I'm not sure even small businesses, when you do an analysis of the strengths of a small business and the extent to which it knows its business, it knows its consumers, it knows its products, it knows its staff, it's not necessarily going to get the prompts right. So we've got a ways to go. In a way, it's trial and error. But the error when made in small business can be pretty severe. Now
It's sort of like when we first introduced the digital calculator.
Yes.
People would just accept the answer they got no matter what buttons they pushed.
Yeah.
This is where we're at with AI, in the sense of people are starting to accept what AI gives them. For example, there's cases where lawyers in court have presented a case as an example of who they were defending and so on, and what the decision was, that was actually made up by AI. It wasn't even a real case.
Do you know when the automobile came out, people actually crashed from time to time?
Yes.
Technology is not smart in itself. Human beings using technology need to be smart enough to have doubt and to learn and to be continuous learners about it. AI is an incredible tool. I could go on some length of the various ways in which I've used it in developing marketing plans for entire industries, or getting marbles out of a carburetor. I mean, the array and the range of things that it's capable of doing is depending upon your own curiosity, your applications, the business that you're in, whether you're making money or simply saving on costs. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's learn how to use it, and let's trust that market forces are adequate to shape it, to make certain that we don't need to worry about liabilities, that it will adapt quickly. When I saw what Sam Altman did a day after ChatGPT 5 came out, when he was subject to market forces that said, you got to make an adaptation, and it was done. There are very few industries that are ever evolved with this speed and this readiness to adapt in order to fulfill the expectations of millions, if not billions. Rachel, you're in the middle of that world. We're into wrap up. Are there any final things you'd like to share with us about the world that we're in or the world we're going into?
Um, yeah, that's actually quite interesting. I'm just chatting with Yutong in the chat about what the world looks like for younger people with jobs being taken by AI. And sometimes I'm really wary about the overly positive outlook that people have about AI, about the fact that it has so much ability to do so much good stuff. And that I feel that a lot of times it's underrepresented the fact that what Yutan's bringing up in the chat. Yeah, AI is going to take a lot of jobs. It's going to change the landscape of industries. Maybe to some of Emerson's points, it's going to force you to have more expertise in order to make as much money doing something as people would have had to have previously in a similar job. So it's important, I think, to represent those. I think that where it's hopeful is that having been through those scenarios many times with the technologies that you've talked about before, changes in the oil and gas industry, or you could go back to the Industrial Revolution if you wanted to, cloud computing, the internet, you name it. We've been through this many times before. So hopefully with this iteration, we can take the lessons from those past times and say, all right, if this is what the future looks like, how can we create jobs and use AI to stimulate the economy, to reduce barriers in areas like in one of our sessions, Emerson talked about housing and how there are so many barriers to housing coming up. Okay, fine. How can we make those things happen faster with AI? How can we improve the landscape for jobs? How can we match people to things where they're better, they have more skills? So hopefully that's the direction in which I can see a hopeful future that still takes into account the realistic parts of AI.
Thank you, Rachel. Excellent summary. Jwalant, you want to add anything here in this wrap-up moment?
Yeah, sure. Just a quick one. So it's a good point that Rachel mentioned, but I will say that the time has come that when the ability of a powerful like AI is increasing, people need to get into more adaptable and agility mode. That means we need to quickly be able to add new skills, unlearn, relearn kind of skills that we need to get into. And we really need to get to a point where we need to not look for the jobs as a young generation, but in fact to create something of our own as into business consulting, and that's the future. Seeking jobs, career based on only the jobs are not the future for the young generation in AI. That's all. Thank you.
I mean, maybe what we've got to rethink the word jobs.
Exactly.
And think more projects.
Yes.
It would seem to me that the change being what it is and the array of things that we can do as a human being is not just sitting on an assembly line and doing the same thing day after day. That's where AI comes in. We as human beings need to be continuous learning and flexible. And we're in that world. This world is a world of creativity. It's astounding. Emerson, anything you want to add here? And then I'll go to Brett.
My final thought is something that the current head of the British Chamber of Commerce shared a number of years ago at a conference that I was at that really struck me and has stayed with me ever since. Is this person said, anybody that does not use these emerging technologies with purpose is demonstrating a failure of ambition. And the more that I've thought about that quote, the more I've thought it's so true. Anybody in any sector of any age that is not using these technologies as part of their day-to-day is frankly not ambitious and doesn't want to maximize their potential as a human. That said, and going back to what we were saying earlier, a person has to exercise doubt. As you're saying, Perry, you have to question what you are receiving and tinker with it and say, does this make any sense? And that requires a lot of time. There's a time cost that Rachel was talking about earlier to make sure that the results are actually good. And the second point, and this gets back to what Rachel was saying earlier, is these technologies then have to face reality. You have to take whatever you've learned and then go out and talk with people, whether it's lawyers, accountants, financiers, startups, etc., to see how this holds up in the real world. So it's a booster that is like steroids for a person that wants to be as good as they can be. It's, as technology has always been, human plus technology is better than human or technology on their own. But you then have to exercise doubt and face the real world, which means talking with other people.
Sure. I want to jump in really quickly because I'm sensing a theme that I object fairly heavily to. So I think it's worth saying something. I keep on hearing a lot about how this technology has to be utilized for ambitious people for the grind. And as somebody who's coming, I'm a millennial, the grind has been a huge part of what it means. I'm starting a business. I understand the grind. I've been grinding for almost a decade, which is much less than I'm sure most of you at this point in time. But I do think that that's not for everyone. I believe in a society where people can make a simple living, where they can maximize their family time, where everything doesn't have to be about having the perfect work-life balance. Otherwise, sorry, I don't know what that noise is, but having the perfect work-life balance otherwise, and having to maximize every piece of available technology and dedicate 150% of your brain space in order to just your job. Like, I mean, sure, some people are incredibly ambitious. I don't think we live in a world of people with 150% ambition, and I don't think we should have to live in that world for people to be able to put food on their tables. And that's the world that we're going to, not, it's not the world we're in right now, and it's not the world we're going to be in the next 10 years. But if everybody keeps on saying these things, that is the world we're going to be in the next 50 years. So I do appreciate the point that, yeah, changing the landscape of what it means to have a job or use AI technologies is something that's very important. But I want to have kids one day. And I want to be able to interact with my husband, with my kids, with my family, with my grandparents who I expect to live with my mom who I expect to live with for a long time, without having to spend every waking hour of my life developing an increasingly large amount of skills to handle increasingly complex technology. Sure, that's wonderful for some people. Maybe that's what I will end up doing. But I think that people, especially people on the more emotive side of the spectrum and the less analytical side of the spectrum, which constitutes about half of the people on this planet, should have access to the same capabilities and abilities where they don't have to use AI like that in order to have a great life. And I want to toss that out here because I agree with so many of the points that have been said, but I don't hear this being represented at all.
I think that summary, Rachel, will apply to virtually every one of our webinars because the webinars are focused on single processes, and today it's about jobs. And what you've emphasized and Emerson alluded to is life is a journey. Jobs are only part of it. AI's impact is going to be much broader than simply jobs. It's going to change the way lives are lived. And one of the things it definitely does is it prompts people to become aware that we are on a journey because they see AI changing before their very eyes. That an automobile changed by design every year, but by and large, it simply took us from A to Z, and maybe in different ways and different levels of comfort and different speeds. But by and large, it was the same. AI is broader than it, and it's going to be involved in everything from your refrigerator to your job, to the way you raise your children, to their learning. Brett, you want to bring any concluding comments here?
No, I just think we're talking about where AI is going and it's moving so quickly that, as soon as you reach artificial general intelligence, you probably won't need the skill sets in regards to interact with AI because it'll be, fairly intuitive.
Right.
And, I think the amount of change we're going to see over the next little while, and, they're worried about AI getting away. But the problems that it will be able to solve, like if AI solves quantum computing and you get artificial general intelligence with quantum computing, I mean, who knows what the world looks like after that?
Right. So we're getting into the conclusion that's the end of September already, and that is, where are we going? Whether we're looking at small businesses, large businesses, caring, or police. We're going to find that at each one of these webinars, this becomes really the focus of the concluding comments. Peter, I think I've called on the panelists. I'm going to ask you, Peter, you've got your hand up still, and then we'll call it a day.
Well, thank you, Perry, and thank you for the panelists, what I've heard so far. I just wanted to add to comments who are talking about the loss of jobs. And there's a couple of metaphors I'd like to use. Perhaps the best one is a modern one, and that's when we switched from the horse to the automobile. That was in a generation, one human generation, and a generation is considered 20 years. So what happened? We had all kinds of roads that replaced the horse and buggy things. So there was an infrastructure, which is sort of like the internet, the internet as an infrastructure. But what embedded is, of course, we got the car, and the car would drive around along these roads. And we ended up having all kinds of new jobs, motels, fast food joints, just-in-time inventory. I mean, millions and millions of jobs created, none of them foreseen. So I think AI has a similar potential. And indeed, it will also, I think, have a huge impact on assisting people already in their jobs or even in their education. So, I mean, education is being turned on its head right now, but there are ways and means of determining whether students are cheating or how best to measure how well they know or learn what they're talking about. I can explain that in the discussion later if you're interested. But nonetheless, I think there'll be all kinds of jobs. It's hard to know what they will all be, of course, at this stage, but we've seen that before. We've seen that with the Industrial Revolution, which was even a more fundamental change in the whole nature of the relationship between humans and machines, whether it was the Luddites or whether it was the rise of the corporation. So
Well,
that's just some comments I'd like to make.
As I said a moment ago, I think the point that you've just made, Peter, and has been echoed in this wrap up, is about AI and its general impact, the speed with which it's coming, and what our future might look like. Jwalant, you had your hand up, otherwise I'm into a wrap up mode.
Sounds interesting. In fact, education is no more going to be confined in the university, but in the practical world, it will be more on the how someone can practice their knowledge, what do they have, and bring value to the economy. So forget the papers, the value of degrees anymore. Students getting out of high school, directly getting into the workplace and learning on the go, on the job training, OJTs, and that's the world that we are looking at in the AI world.
It's
Thank you.
interesting that was very much the subject of a breakfast that I had today of the future of universities, is concerning. If
Just
they're not,
Indeed.
if they're not adapting. Emerson?
I mean, just two thoughts. I mean, Rachel, your point just now is a very well put and important point. I mean, I have two thoughts on it. One is because there's so much more focus on using these technologies, it can take away the non-work aspects of life. So, art galleries and that kind of aspect of life becomes even more important. The emotive leisure aspect of life becomes more important, and I'm certainly finding that is. It's important to get out of that sort of AI productivity focused paradigm. On the other hand, and I think this is a real tension, and it hasn't come up in this conversation, is the macro sort of consideration for the world that we're in, which is fundamentally U.S.-Chinese competition. We're entering an increasingly competitive world between the U.S. on one side and China on the other that are using these technologies. That's probably going to usher in hyper-competitiveness well beyond what we even experience right now over the next 30 to 50 years. So I think there's a genuine tension there. One is using these for competition that could be existential and is about our values fundamentally. And then to your point on how we balance that with actually more leisure time to spend time with people. Those are my sort of two thoughts on the really good point that you shared.
And I think even then using AI then to create a better workforce becomes even more important, a more efficient, not a workforce that is more perpetuating itself, but that's actually improving, that's able to use AI to make the work happen faster, then becomes even, and higher quality becomes even more important. And given the considerations of China, to actually improve the prospects of the future generations with AI, again, then becomes even more important in light of what you said.
Okay, so I'm going to read you, bringing us back to small business, away from the broader picture of the future and what it and how to prepare for it. For business leaders and professionals, the newsletter wrapped up with one: start with efficiency gains. Automation of repetitive processes offers the fastest payback. I think we started with that. Secondly, invest in data discipline. Quality data will underpin future AI-driven revenue. Data is the oil of the future, the gold. And thirdly, strengthen human skills. Empathy, trust, and judgment will remain irreplaceable. And what I think we just concluded with is think ahead. Both words, think and foresight. Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with those two. So I thank you all for your input today. This was rich, richer than I possibly could have imagined. Thank you, Randa. We can wrap up the recording and carry on from here with our after party.